Hello, I'm Terry Christensen, and this is our Valley Politics Election Preview. Today, Ramona Giwargis of Spotlight and SJSU professor Garrick Percival will break down the hottest local races for us. And then Santa Clara County Registrar voter Shannon Bushey tells us more about voting in the March election. And that's what's coming up on Valley Politics. Welcome everyone, and welcome Garrick Percival of San Jose State University and Ramona Giwargis of San Jose Spotlight. We're going to talk about the local elections. Before we do that, neither of you have endorsed or contributed to candidates, and Spotlight doesn't endorse. Is that right?
No, as a nonprofit we do.
Garrick?
No, I have not. No, I have not.
Then we're all clean. No endorsements, no contributions. So the media focus has been on the presidential election mostly, but we've got some really, I think, pretty interesting and important local races: City Council, County Supervisor, State Senate, State Assembly. I ask each of you to pick a race, a local race of greatest interest to you. Ramona, let's start with you. What was your pick?
Absolutely. So I actually picked the District 3 race, the Santa Clara County Supervisor District 3 race. This one was interesting to me because, as you know, Supervisor Dave Cortese has been in that seat for a number of years. He's aligned himself with labor and more progressive causes, and right now the Board of Supervisors, it's a 3-2 majority in terms of the more progressive labor-backed candidates. And so depending on obviously what happens with that seat, that could change some of the dynamics on the Board of Supervisors, the 5-member Board of Supervisors. So it's an open seat, and we've got 4 candidates who are running right now. And what's interesting to in this race, in my opinion, is that there really doesn't seem to be a front runner. Mm-hmm. They're all working hard. They're all out in the community. They're all putting out mail. They're all basically hitting the pavement, as they say. But there doesn't seem to be a clear front runner. So the candidates are San Jose Council member Magdalena Carrasco, who represents District 5 on the San Jose City Council, East San Jose. Otto Lee, who's a former Sunnyvale mayor and also council member. John Leba, who's the only Republican in the race, and he's a former San Jose planning commissioner. And then, of course, Kansan Chu, who's a current state assembly member who's running for this seat as well.
And
so,
what's your call?
My pick?
Yeah. Why?
Well, I think if I had to venture a guess, I would say that Magdalena Carrasco and Kansan Chu make it into the runoff. And the reason is because I think Magdalena Carrasco and Kansan Chu, they're the only 2 individuals in this race who are current office holders. So they currently are in office. They have a voting record. We can look at their voting record and see, where they stand on issues. I think both of them have the most name recognition. John Leba, has never held elected office, though he did run for the Alum Rock School Board. He was a former planning commissioner, as I mentioned. Otto Lee has been out of office since 2011, so he doesn't have as much name recognition. I will also say this is a very heavy minority district. It's a minority-majority district. It's actually 17% Latino, 17% Vietnamese, 8% Chinese, 8% Indian, and 8% Filipino. So you've got sort of the only Latina in the race right now. The only person, of Latin descent is Magdalena Carrasco. So I think that automatically gives her an advantage. Being a woman gives her an advantage, I think, against these other 3 guys. So I would say that's my guess if I really had to guess. But I don't see, at least at this point, with ballots already in people's hands, we're in February, I just don't see a clear front runner yet. So.
I wouldn't underestimate Otto Lee. He does have a base in Sunnyvale. He has to get beyond that. True. Carrasco's problem is most of her council district is not in this supervisorial district, only the eastern end of it.
Yeah.
But she's the Latina and the woman in the race.
Right.
So significant advantage there. What do you think, Garrick?
Well, it's for me the front runners is Kansan Chu. He's been in public office a long time. He's served on the San Jose City Council. He's been in the assembly. So in terms of name recognition, being able to sell himself as someone who is coming back home in a way, he really feels that it's at the local level where he can have the biggest impact. So I think he knows how to speak to the local issues and what local government can do. So for me, he's the front runner in that race.
Right. Certainly, he must have the most name ID because he's been in office for so long and specifically representing most of that district. So I'd put him in front runner status. as well.
Yeah, and Otto Lee, I don't know if we mentioned this yet, but he also ran for that seat previously
He did.
in 2008.
He's run a lot.
He's run a lot, and he did make the runoff in that case, but he lost by a landslide to Dave Cortese, the current office holder. So he's already kind of tried it in terms of that district. So we'll see if it's different this time.
It is a little strange, isn't it, Garrick? You're an expert on state politics to see somebody from the assembly stepping down.
Right.
To
It doesn't happen very often, right? Joe Smidian did.
Well,
he's gone both ways, right?
He was turned out.
Yeah, right. To
He had no
leave
choice.
to leave office right
Yeah.
early. It is really unusual. It usually goes the other way, right?
On the
So-
other hand, if he'd waited, there wouldn't have been this open seat.
Right.
Right? Because
Right.
whoever gets elected is probably going to be there for 3 terms, total of 12 years. So
Right. Right.
now politicians kind of have to pick their time
Right.
and move when it's possible.
And I think too, I think it emphasizes that it's at the local level where you, in terms of the way our politics are aligned today, you can get a lot done in a lot of sense. So there's not as much polarization. As Kansan Chu being one of many Democrats in the state legislature, feeling that you can make your mark there may be more difficult. So I think again at the local level may be more appealing just from a career standpoint.
He's one of 5 supervisors instead of one of 80
Right.
assembly members, yeah. Well, Garrick, we asked you to pick a key race too. Which one did you choose?
Well, I've been watching the Senate District 15 race, and what's really, I think, important to note is, California, for having almost 40 million people, has very few state senators. We only have 40 of them, right? So this is one of 40.
1 per million.
One per million. This seat has been held by Jim Bell since 2012. Jim Bell is leaving behind a legacy of very active in terms of lawmaking, passing big bills in transportation and mental health and criminal justice reform, just being some of them. So this is, these are, it's an important seat in terms of policy, but it also represents a very diverse district. I mean, we were talking about Los Gatos and Saratoga, and about 80% or so of San Jose. At San Jose State, I tell my students a lot about this district because it really kind of speaks to the challenges that lawmakers have in trying to represent a diverse set of constituents in terms of income and race and ethnicity. So we have several really high quality candidates in this race. In terms of what I mean by high quality is that high name recognition, have been in public office for a long time, many of them. Their ability to raise money is significant. Johnny Camus, who is termed out as the city councilman of San Jose from District 10. Dave Cortese, of course, longtime public official in city and county government, leaving county government. Ann Ravel, who's a prominent attorney and served both in California and the federal government. Tim Gildersleeve, who's run for offices several times, and then Nora Campos, who's served both in the state assembly and for the city council for a number of years as well. So these are all high quality candidates, each with their own constituencies. Camus is really interesting because he was a former Republican with the Trump administration, has since renounced his membership of the Republican Party, is now running as a no party preference. I think this is really a smart move in a lot of ways. We'll have to see how this works for him, but in terms of framing his candidacy, he's really setting himself apart from some of the more liberal members who are running, particularly Cortese, Campos, and that he's kind of running against both parties. Saying that the Democrats are having entrenched interests, or sort of fighting with the Republicans, and here comes the adult in the room is going to come. We're going to be better with our money. We're going to make our money go further, more efficient, get better outcomes based on that. So I think he's one to watch.
He is Republican endorsed.
He is Republican endorsed. Now that could really, again, the Republican brand, especially in the Bay Area, is damaged. It's damaged in large parts of the state in terms of its ties to Trump. So it may not be enough. I mean, a lot of voters may see the former Republican attachment to his name and reject him for that. They also, there's going to, we'll talk about, I know this in a little bit, but big turnout, right? So if there's the Democratic base turns out in large numbers, he may not be able to stop the tide there.
They'll be drawn by the presidential primary.
Right, exactly.
What about the other candidates?
Well, Dave Cortese, again, is typically strong backing from labor unions. He's able to raise a lot of money, and this race is going to be really expensive. and it already has been. A lot of money has been spent. Ann Ravel is really selling herself as a reformer, pushing for transparency, also as going after the women's vote, along with Nora Campos. And I think that's going to be one to really watch in terms of they're both reaching out to women voters. Women are voting in larger numbers, disproportionately to men, and so I think that's one of the key factors to watch is do they split votes along those lines, along gender lines, but also too, if you think back to the mayoral election, San Jose mayoral election from 2014, Dave Cortese ran really strongly on the east side of the city, right? And that's also Nora Campos's a strong territory there. So you could see a split in support among Cortese and Campos, just putting aside gender for a moment. And so I think that may offer an opening for Ravel to come in and snag a top 2 place.
Yeah, absolutely. I was going to add, I'd heard about some polling that was done, and I'm sure, as with all polls, there's always an angle. It depends on who does it, if it's a campaign, if it's a special interest group. But the polling, found Dave and Johnny, Dave Cortese and Johnny Campos, Johnny Camus and Nora Campos, all sort of, almost locked for that first place position. Even though Dave sort of emerged as a front runner, he was, I think, one of the first, if not the first, who announced he's running for this office. We're seeing, Councilmember Camus and former Assemblymember Campos really sort of taking some of that territory from him. So those 3 were really close in the polling that I had been told about.
And one other thing I would mention that there's a lot of undecided voters out there too. So a lot of the candidates like to present favorable polls to the news media, and certainly that's news, and it's important measure of the current state of the race. But we also have to look at the large percentage of voters who just haven't made up their minds yet, and a lot of them haven't really even started thinking about the local elections yet, and we're only a few weeks away.
I'm pretty skeptical about polling at this stage. I did get polled twice, actually. That's when I pick up my phone, when I know it's a pollster, and they were asking questions that were factually incorrect in some cases, which they didn't want to hear me correct, and questions that most people wouldn't really have enough knowledge to answer in a very intelligent way. But they're clues, and that's really the way to take the polls they're clues. We've also heard Nora Campos is getting major independent expenditures, right? Do you know how much?
Right.
Hundreds of thousands?
Yeah, so San Jose Spotlight just did a story on this. There's definitely been some friction between 2 candidates, the 2 women, Ann Ravel and Nora Campos. And Campos, she was attacked for this the last time she ran for Senate against Jim Bell. She lost that race. But essentially, there's been over $400,000 of independent expenditures on her behalf from big oil companies and oil-linked companies. So Ann Ravel this week actually called on her to give back the money. She's demanded that she gives back the money and apologize. So Campos has responded by saying that I will give back the money when Ravel gives back the money that she's getting from insurance companies. Because, as you know, Ravel had made a promise to not take any kind of corporate funding money, not to take any kind of PAC money. So at this point, it's kind of turned into this, right? Both of them are.
She said.
Absolutely.
So, Garrick, who's your pick? Which 2 for the top?
Well, that's a tough
2.
one. I'm going to say Camus is going to. I think there's a as we've been talking about in recent years, sort of a lanes of politics. I think Camus has a clear lane for Republicans and independents who are sort of disenchanted with the Democratic Party, or both parties. So I think he can get a first or second, and my second choice I think is going to be Cortese. A strong ground operation, door knock. He's been around for a long time. He's run a lot of races here. So those are my top 2.
He's going to have the most money, and he does have a strong ground operation, door-to-door operation. So he would be my pick. I don't know who else. Do you? Do you have a guess?
I agree with Garrick. I think Councilmember Camus, setting himself apart, as you said, by being the only person who's saying, I'm independent, I'm not a Democrat, I'm not a Republican, I'm your alternative choice. And people more than ever now want that middle ground. They want that alternative. They don't want to be far left or far right. So I think that he has that advantage, and I think he's also been running a very strong campaign. And of course, Supervisor Cortese has, from the start, gained a lot of support from the community and has been in office for a very long time, so has a lot of name recognition.
Yeah, but I wouldn't write off Ann Ravel. She's got a powerful message if she can get it out successfully. Well, okay, I'm going to talk a little bit about the city council races, and we'll let you 2 chime in eventually. I'm going to run through a few of the seats. There are 5 seats up. 4 of them have incumbents running for re-election. There's 1 open seat, and that's Almaden, District 10. That's Camus's district. He's termed out. 2 candidates there. Matt Mahan is the candidate I would pick as the leading contender. He's raised a lot of money. He has independent expenditure support from a group founded by Carl Guardino of the Silicon Valley Leadership Group. He's got business endorsements, the endorsement of the mayor. He's a hard worker. His opponent, Jenny Higgins Branadini, is an appealing candidate. Labor's supporting her, but I don't think that's a prime district for them to pick up. But I do think that one will be decided without a runoff. You have to get 50% plus 1. There are 3 candidates. Helen Wong is the 3rd. But I would say Mahan is likely to carry that in the primary. As for the other 4 races, unusually all 4 of the incumbents have challengers. And it's been in the past, a lot of incumbents have run with minimal challengers or none. But I think at least a couple of them have reasonably serious challengers. District 2 is Edenvale. Sergio Jimenez is the incumbent. He's opposed by Jonathan Fleming, who's a Republican. I think Sergio picks that one up with well over 50%. He's a hard campaigner. He's worked really hard in the district. Fleming's a Republican. I don't think he has enough of a base to really put Sergio Jimenez in jeopardy. So I would call that one for Jimenez. District 8's interesting. Again, only 2 candidates. So somebody's going to win in March. Silvia Arenas is the incumbent. She's challenged by Jim Zito. Jim is business endorsed, mayor endorsed, former school trustee, planning commissioner, so substantial experience, and as of quite recently, an endorsement by the Mercury News, which is helpful to candidates. Spotlight doesn't endorse, so you're out of this game, but the Mercury does, and people read those endorsements. I think this one's too tough to call. You got a call?
Yeah, I would go for Silvia Arenas. I think she's going to win. But I think he's making her work, and he's making her work really hard because, as you mentioned, the Mercury News did endorse him. He's also got the endorsement of Mayor Sam Liccardo, which I think carries weight, right? You've got a sitting mayor who's endorsing someone that's other than his own colleague, right? He's endorsing outside of his own council. So that says something, and that sends a message. And I also know that Jim has a lot of name recognition in Evergreen.
Yeah.
He's an Evergreen guy. He's seen out on the streets. They know him from his time on the school board, as you mentioned, Terry, on the planning commission. So while I don't think he can do it, I think Silvia wins. I still believe that he's going to make her work. He's going to make labor work. They're going to make them spend a lot of money that they probably were not prepared to spend.
They better.
Right.
So.
Yeah, and Arenas, she is a hardworking candidate. She ran a kind of under-the-radar campaign when she was first elected and kind of surprised people that she did so well. And if she can put that same thing together, then she's got a really good shot at getting reelected. Then there's District 6, which is Willow Glen and the Rose Garden. Incumbent Dev Davis there has 3 challengers. One of them, Jake Tonkel, has a labor endorsement. He's raised enough money to at least put on a credible campaign. But I don't think Davis will lose unless the 3 of those guys all come through with kind of like 15% of the vote each, and I don't know if that's going to happen. So I guess my call there is Davis gets reelected. But with 3 opponents, it's possible they could cumulatively get over 50%.
Right. Yeah, I think in that race, you do have the Navarro who's run before.
Yeah.
So a little bit more name recognition, not much money, but just the sheer number of candidates, right? As you're saying, Terry.
It's a very young guy, Marshall Woodmansee, who's appealing a lot to the youth vote and calling out the council and VTA and others on climate change. Inadequate action on climate change. He's going to have a core of votes.
Right.
So the question is, how big?
Exactly right.
But I guess we're all saying probably Davis.
Yeah.
Probably Davis, but probably not. I'm going to say not winning outright.
Oh, really?
March,
okay,
right?
you're
So
getting out there.
I'm getting out there.
Okay, cool. Well, that leaves us with District 4, where Londeep is the incumbent running for re-election. He's got 2 challengers, I think both very credible candidates, Sui Tran and David Cohen. They've raised money. They're both labor endorsed. They're Democratic Party endorsed. What do you think? We have about 3 minutes, by the way.
I'll make mine really quick.
Okay.
I think that we know obviously that Hui Tran appeals to the Vietnamese base and to the Asian voters that Lon Diep was counting on. We've heard anecdotally that there is some discontent in that community with whether or not they were represented over the last 4 years. But also David Cohen, I would not count David Cohen out because he has been part of the Democratic Party for decades, right, Terry? And he's been so involved, and they're both running a very strong ground game. They're knocking on doors, they're out in the community. And Diep, in many ways, has been seen as a vulnerable candidate. And this makes a huge difference in the city council because he is that 6-5 vote that the mayor has. Liccardo has the majority right now. The business faction has the majority, but by 1. So that seat is so critical.
Yeah. Well, they're all critical to that 6, but this is the most vulnerable one to the mayor's majority.
Yeah,
you agree?
Right, especially on development issues. I think that's when we see that 6 vote really mattering, and how much power do you want to give to developers? And Diep has been in line with Liccardo on that, a lot of key votes in the last couple of years. The other thing to keep in mind with this race is Diep barely won, last time, so we're just, something, 13 or just a handful of votes, right? So this has just been a really competitive district. We have really 3 strong candidates, each with their own, I think, constituencies. So this is going to be a hard-fought race. It's tough to predict, but it's hugely important, of course, depending on what happens in these other races. But especially, I think, housing and development is a big one.
The other big issue on those 6-5 votes, and most votes are unanimous, but when it gets down to the 6-5, the mayor's 6 versus the other 5, the other big thing the other 5 have been pushing is equity among council districts.
Right.
And that's a very big and very complicated issue, which this outcome in this district could significantly affect. So what's your call, Garrick?
Well, I think that I'm going to go Lon Diep, and is I think it's going to be tight again. I'm going to go with Huitron to win this race.
Really?
I am, and partly because
wait, that's just because he's a San Jose State political science alum.
Well, he is. I do know that. I do know that. But I'm thinking about the larger electorate here. And I think that's it's one thing to think about just local politics, but remember these races are happening in this larger environment, and I think this could be a friendly electorate for someone like Huitron.
Ramona, we're down to seconds.
Okay, I'll be quick too. I agree. I think Diep loses his seat. I don't know who wins it though, Terry. I'm having a really hard time. I was leaning toward Tran as well, but I've seen that David's garnering a lot of support in the district. So if I really had to pick, I think David Cohen.
Oh,
who you think? I want to know your opinion.
I'm going to chicken out and not pick, except to say I'm sure there will be a runoff, and I think Lon will be in it. So I think it depends whether it's David or Hui.
I think. Oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry, we're out of time. I wish we could carry on, but we can't. So thank you both very much.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for having us.
Now here's Santa Clara County Registrar of Voters Shannon Bushey with an update on when we can expect to see election results, and also how voters registered as no party or independent can participate in the presidential primary. What about counting the ballots? Presumably you're going to get more ballots by mail before Election Day. So election night, when you release your first numbers, there'll probably be more voters being counted by then. Is it going to take as long as usual to get to the final count? Because it takes weeks sometimes, right?
Well, you would think maybe that because we're mailing out ballots to everyone, they're going to return them sooner. But I've worked in elections for 25 years, and voters still do like to send their ballots in at the last moment. We can receive 100, 200,000 ballots on election week alone. I've received over 100,000 ballots on one election day before. So that part I just have no control over when they're going to return it. But as far as results, so we do really kind of have 2 results that we like to talk about. We have election night results that people wait, and then we have our final results, which we do 30 days after the election. So our election night results are going to be sped up for a couple reasons. We have now implemented a new voting system that is a precinct count based system. Our prior system was a central count, meaning all paper ballots had to come back to our office on election night, and we had to run them all through the machine. So that's what takes so long. So with our brand new system, that was a requirement that we made, that the new system tabulate ballots at every vote center. So now we will have couriers actually go out, pick up the cartridge and the information in teams for security purposes, and bring it back to our office. And now we'll just have to upload the results. So election night results, we have done everything we possibly can to get those to speed up. With the final results that we do at 30 days, that one will still be at the 30 days because we have audits that we prepare, testing of machines, many security practices, and review that we go through after an election.
Well, faster results on election night is good news for election junkies like me.
It is.
Yeah.
We're really happy to be able to do that for our community.
Thank you very much.
You're
Let me go back just one step on the mail-in ballots. What's the deadline? What's the postmark deadline to be counted?
Sure. The law allows for a ballot to be postmarked on Election Day, March 3rd, and received in our office within 3 days. So if we receive the ballot and it was postmarked on the 3rd, we will be able to count it if we receive it in the 3 days. So it's actually another great advantage for the voter to be able to get it postmarked.
Okay, thank you. So March 3rd, we vote on a lot of important local races, ballot measures, candidates for the state legislature, candidates for Congress, but it's also a presidential primary.
Correct.
So we need to make clear to voters who gets to vote in which primary. So who can vote in the Republican presidential primary?
Well, for the Republican Party, it is only registered voters in the Republican Party that can vote on a Republican presidential contest.
And in the Democratic presidential
So we
primary?
have a little bit of difference in the Democratic in that in the normal Democratic voter can vote for a Democratic president, but a no party preference voter is
Often
also
called
allowed.
Independent voters,
Right, or
yeah.
nonpartisan. Those voters.
Technically no party preference, yeah.
Correct. No party preference, nonpartisan, independent voters.
Yeah.
They can actually request what we call a crossover ballot, where they are allowed to get a special ballot that has that Democratic Party presidential contest with all the other contests they would have normally voted on. So all a voter needs to do who's a independent or nonpartisan voter is tell us that they would like to vote in one of the crossover parties. Actually, the Libertarian, the Democratic, and the American Independent parties are allowing nonpartisan voters to cross over and vote into their primary election.
And how does the voter tell you that?
Well, we've actually just completed a mailing several weeks ago. We informed every voter of the option. So they could tell us by mail, they could send the card back, they can contact our office and let us know they want to cross over and vote into one of the 3 parties that allowed it. But even easier also, if they forget to send us that card, is they can go to any vote center and those 11 days and walk in and say, I'd like to go ahead and cross over and get a different ballot. So it's easy anyway.
Okay, thank you for that. That does make it easier for the no party preference voters. There have been allegations about voter fraud, not in Santa Clara County, but in other places. Does that worry you, especially with more people voting by mail?
In Santa Clara County, we don't have any confirmed issues of voter fraud, and we take that very seriously in everything that we do. That is part of our audits. We conduct testing and audits of all of the machine, each piece of voting equipment before it goes out to the vote centers where the people vote. When the information and the equipment and the ballots come back to our office, we also then account for every ballot we've sent out. We audit every single vote center's information. We take security and the whole issue of fraud very seriously, as I said. We work actually also with federal, local, and state officials, and like the Department of Justice, the FBI, Homeland Security, the Secretary of State's office, and our county information security services. So we work with so many agencies and people year-round to keep everything as safe as we possibly can.
Okay, so we won't worry about that.
No.
Good.
I mean, you don't need to worry because that is our job to worry, and we are handling it.
All right, thank you. So if people want to know more about the changes, how can they get more information?
We actually have a lot of information on our website, We will be mailing voters information as we go. Actually, there's a direct mailing that is being mailed to every voter beginning this week, actually today on December 9th. So they can look for that in their mail. But they can also go to our website at the sccvote.org, and we have a tab called Voters Choice Act.
Voters'
and on
Choice.
that, we have that implementation plan. They can see what we're going to be doing. And the key aspects, like everyone's going to get a ballot, you can go to every vote center. So we have a lot of great information for our voters, and I hope that they see how convenient and easy this new voting model will be for them.
And the ballots go out 29 days before the March 3rd election, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Voters should be looking in their mailbox for those shortly after the beginning of February.
Great. Well, Registrar Bushey, thank you very much for your time.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
We'll be back next month with election results and analysis. Meanwhile, you can follow us on Facebook, and you can catch up on all our previous shows on YouTube by searching for Create TV San Jose, or on our website at createtvsj.org. And now that's all, folks. Thank you, and see you next time.